Hosted in conjunction with Chris Media, the CEO interview series allows investors to hear directly from the CEOs leading the companies featured on Wholesale Investor. Enjoy the interview and reach out via the details in the description. Hi, and welcome to our Chris Media interviews. Today, I am joined by the CEO of ASX-listed Recce. Our ASX stock code is RCE. Welcome, James.
Hi, Steve. Good to be with you.
Now, we've obviously known each other for some time, and just to give some context to our relationship, you know, I think I first met you about sort of 5 to 6 years ago, but we started working together sort of around sort of mid-2019. And I remember sort of watching your share price at that time, sort of around that sort of 15 cents to 20 cents. And it was also at a time I had a lot of different people mentioning it sort of about you, that it's sort of, you know, you're obviously based in WA and you've gradually been building this sort of portfolio, and it was like the market hadn't become aware of what you were doing at that stage. And you were seeing that 15 to 20 cents. And we've obviously seen an incredible rise to sort of prominence over the last sort of 2 to 3 years. So as a first step, can you give a simplified background to Recce and what you do?
Yeah, look, thanks, Steve. And what a journey it's been. I mean, Recce Pharmaceuticals is built upon good people, but really good technology. And that good technology is building upon the capabilities of this new class of antibiotics, or really anti-infectives, as we've discovered. My initial activity was really supporting good science, the invention of former head of Johnson & Johnson Research Australasia, who was executive director of their board there for 10 years, in his retirement, you know, tinkering in the lab, having a go of, rather than taking what's from nature and using it against it as traditional antibiotics are, but beginning with first principles in mind to design what we wanted in the compounds to overcome that hypercellular mutation or challenge of antibiotic resistant superbugs. So I started as the passive investor, and it turned into a more active investor. And that passive investment was the first investment. And now we have about 5,500 shareholders, and we're certainly a going concern company.
Fantastic. You certainly are. Now let's target in on that area as far as antibiotic resistant superbugs. Can you sort of explain that in a bit more detail? Because I know that's been officially documented as one of the threats from the WHO and so forth. So can you explain that in a bit more detail? Why that is such a massive area, and I suppose why it's such a big area for investment?
Well, look, absolutely, and I'm still bemused if I say it, that people perhaps have not, or are only now coming around to recognise that major health threat that exists. In fact, World Health, or the United Nations, more above and beyond World Health, sat to discuss the problem of antibiotic resistance. What is that? The drugs don't work, and the drugs don't work by way of the traditional classes. And, you know, I remember the days you'd go to the doctor, you'd have an infection, they'd say, take these antibiotics, you'd get better. Now you go back with the same infection, they say, take these antibiotics with these follow-on repeats to overcome that exact same infection. So what's really happening there is the bacteria mutating, and the drugs are not keeping up. There hasn't been a new class in over 40 years. So we've got these mutating, and, you know, they're becoming faster and more able, and you're still trying to sell a Datsun at a terrible price and terrible performance. It's time to have a new model and really deliver a Porsche that's able to keep up. And that really is unique mechanisms of action able to overcome that hypercellular mutation, work and keep on working with repeated use, something all existing antibiotics no longer able to do.
And you're, like, from a company perspective, you're taking a portfolio approach to this. So give us some sort of insight into that portfolio and, I suppose, the different areas that you're targeting.
Yeah, so we're lucky in that it's a platform technology. So traditionally, most biotechs all bets on one drug. As a portfolio approach, what that really means is our primary indication is sepsis, septicemia, or blood poisoning. So it's basically where you get a break in the skin, bacteria gets in, spreads around, and the likelihood of survival within the first 24 hours is about a 1 in 5 in the community, or a 2 in 3 in hospital. It's the #1 most expensive condition treated in health, double the second most, bigger than cancer, bigger than diabetes. So what that really means is we designed our compound rather than the traditional challenge of the clinicians of doing a blood draw and trying to work out what type of bacteria is causing the infection. because it could be any number of hundreds of different types of bacteria, and only then selecting the type of antibiotic that hopefully that bacteria is susceptible to, do you start to get on top of, hopefully, the infection. So we designed ours to eliminate that upfront guesswork, eliminate the time-consuming diagnostics, intravascularly infused, knowing, well, one, be attracted to the bacteria that's in your blood if you have a septic infection, because there's no such thing as good bacteria in your blood, and two, overcome that infection at patient presentation, leading to obviously better patient outcomes. So it's with design of our compound having a broad spectrum of attraction, binding, and interaction with the bacteria that gives us that sepsis position. So we're the only clinical stage new class of antibiotic for sepsis in the world at this moment. To my knowledge, it's the only FDA-accredited QIDP designation compound, which gives us 10 years of market exclusivity above and beyond our patent position. And utilising that same technology, rather than intravascularly dosing it, spraying it on the surface of infected burn wounds. I mean, I'm in my mum's sewing room at this moment in Perth, Western Australia, because I'm here meeting Professor Fiona Wood, Dr. Ed Rabi, and colleagues as a West Australian-sponsored phase 1, phase 2 clinical study happening as we speak. So 2 clinical programs with a portfolio suite of preclinicals, Helicobacter pylori, sinusitis, a coronavirus, dare I say it, simply because of the attraction, binding, and interaction to the proteins of envelope viruses. It's a portfolio approach, and we're really getting ahead as an infectious disease company.
And as a, for you sort of going, obviously anyone looking at you will be going to your sort of ASX and having a look at your sort of string of announcement. For you, you had a big 2021. Obviously, you've had a massive last 3 years, but just give some highlights as far as what are some of the key milestones you crossed in 2021 that were sort of important inflection points.
Yeah, look, I think when we listed the company, which was really that stage of stepping out into the public light, we listed for 2 purposes. One was to automate our manufacturing, so to take from that manual process to produce the same product every time with that reproducibility, which in fact gave us good indication of the scalability. We delivered that. And that obviously takes time. And in that time, that stage of fruition of being able to produce clinical grade product ready for clinical trials was one of our key deliverables. And I think the market reflected that. With that key deliverable, that then allowed us obviously to start these clinical trials. In that the other purpose of the IPO itself was to provide sufficient capital to complete the suite of what's called IND enabling studies, or studies that enable a clinical investigation or clinical study to then occur. So we identified a very good suite of, efficacy, safety, tolerability, pharmacokinetics, pharmacology of our compounds that created a understanding and comfort to then step into humans. So we got approval to start our intravascular study. We got approval to start the phase 1, phase 2 study. Well, that's 2 investigator brochure or human ethics committee approvals. Whilst at the same time, in the infectious disease crisis that surrounded us and our patents advancing to granted statuses, we found a perspective of the one, value and importance that the community put on new medicine, and 2, the recognition of the comorbidities that may come from coronaviruses, representing a major unmet medical need that this technology plays to. So, heck, good time to be in business.
It certainly is. It's amazing how timing can work for some companies, because especially, with life science, we know it can be often a long tail to get to this stage where you're at. It can be sort of 5 to 10 years of hard work, as you sort of outlined. And for you, like, what do you see as, for looking at 2022, like, you've done an incredible job of attracting some great shareholders to your register. If you want to give some insight to that, that would be...
Brilliantly said. Look, I think, we raised $28.5 million in equity. The company has no debt, it's caveat free, wholly owned the technology. But in that attraction of these new investors, we really attracted top tier blue chip investors. Look, I'm not supposed to name them, but among friends, Fidelity International, we'll say, is behind the nominee. Every good institution, they hide behind these nominee accounts, and everyone goes, "Oh, there's no one there." There's one holder there. It's only one, and they're a big holder. And I want to be able to shout it loud and proud, because getting the reciprocation of appreciating the value of what we've put together. The endorsement that comes from that is perhaps a better word of saying it. Groups like Fidelity International is our second largest, or third largest, depending. I'm fighting them to try to get second myself. I've been buying in the background. I invested in that capital round. I invested following that capital round. It's just nice to see institutions coming on board. And when we see those nominee accounts, don't be fooled. There's other institutions hiding behind them too. And it's nice to broaden our portfolio of shareholders, which I think we've got about 5,000 shareholders now.
Yeah, it's incredible work. And as far as for next steps, when you're sort of looking at sort of 2022 and what's ahead for Recce, what do you see as your key milestones going forward?
Look, I really see this as a wonderful inflection point in the company where we've stepped into our human clinical studies. We've had excellent preliminary indications in our clinical studies. I mean, on the burn wound side of things, all patients have had a complete clinical response. We've demonstrated complete killing of the bacteria by way of the halving the amount of time the patients need to be dosed. We thought it would be longer. It's in fact about half that because there's no more bacteria to treat. And then on the intravascular side of things, which is your typical safety study program, we've been dose escalating and we're so far 10-fold, so intravenously infusing 10 times what the initial dose was. What does that mean? You've got it in the intravascular side of things, a product that's demonstrating good safety and tolerability, but on the efficacy side of things, excellent efficacy. Now, obviously, they're parallel programs. They are different, but there is synergy. It's the same product. There is synergy between the two. So that puts us in a position of there is something that comes next. We do suddenly build upon those clinical positions. And what that means for the company, not only building upon those present clinical positions, but as the preclinical candidates come to their advanced stages, I would really confidently expect a number of new clinical programs coming on board. Naturally, people go, oh no, opportunity, that means cost. These things cost bugger all. I mean, the intravascular program's like $2 million. Well, we've currently got about 15 mil at bank. And by the way, that's already paid for. There's a topical program that doesn't cost us anything. It's West Australian Teaching Hospital paying for the whole thing. It's easy to identify bacteria, no problem, and advance the company and its compounds in the wake of that. So it's really multiple news flow events across multiple clinical programs with a suite of preclinicals coming to their stages of fruition. So I don't expect a capital raising. I expect good business, good technology, getting a fair go across our many programs.
Fantastic. And I suppose one of the things I've always found interesting about ASX sort of biotech companies is that often you look at sort of international sort of counterpart, or you look at international transactions for similarly staged companies, and you find there is a significant gap sort of in those values. Have you, looking at your own sort of market cap for what you've achieved with Recce, and said you've done incredibly well over the last 2 to 3 years, is there sort of, I suppose, international companies that you look at where you think, okay, this is probably a better reflection of where our valuation could be heading?
Yeah, there is. So I look to, you talk to an analyst, they'll cut you down. From us, I to a degree, I'm the eternal optimist, but that gets us ahead. And I look to a company that was a success for a period of time. Frankly, and then everyone discovered the technology was not able to keep up with the hypercellular mutation of superbugs, so therefore wasn't worth much. We do. But that company was called Qiagen. It was a NASDAQ-listed company, phase 2, sepsis designated, only against 1, maybe 2 different types of bacteria, we're against any type of bacteria. And they had a capitalization of around $1.8 billion at that time. And by the way, it wasn't like a straight vertical. If you bring it back to say where we are now, they're comparable, maybe about $1 billion. I'm not saying at all that necessarily we're undervalued or overvalued or anything similar to our valuation, but when I look to history and what that may suggest for our future, it certainly suggests that a technology that's able to overcome that hypermutation, that has a very good position in its present phase 1 and likely going into a phase 2 during the calendar year. Heck, there might be a difference in valuation points there, and we'll certainly have to see.
Well, James, really appreciate the time. Great insights of what you've been working on, and I suppose what's ahead for the company, and also where you've been over the last sort of couple of years. So really, once again, really appreciate the time, and great if you can provide some more insight.